31. We're going to read the first 8 verses. It says, Now the Philistines fought against Israel, and the men of Israel fled from before the Philistines and fell slain on Mount Gilboa. Then the Philistines followed hard after Saul and his sons, and the Philistines killed Jonathan, Abinadab, and Melech-Ishua, Saul's sons. The battle became fierce against Saul. The archers hit him, and he was severely wounded by the archers. Verse 4. Then Saul said to the armor-bearer, Draw your sword and thrust me through with it, lest these uncircumcised men come and thrust me through and abuse me. But his armor-bearer would not, for he was greatly afraid. Therefore Saul took a sword and fell on it. When his armor-bearer saw that Saul was dead, he also fell on his sword and died with him. So Saul and his 3 sons, his armor-bearer, and all the men died together that day. When the men of Israel who were on the other side of the valley and those who were on the other side of the Jordan saw the men of Israel had fled, and Saul and his sons were dead, they forsook the cities and fled. Philistines came in and dwelt in them. So it happened the next day when the Philistines came and stripped slain that were found. Saul and his 3 sons had fallen on Mount Gilboa. And then they cut off Saul's head and took his armor, and it sent it through the land of Philistia to proclaim in the temple of their idols among their people. And so here we see a change in the leadership of Israel. I bring this up today because we've had a change in our nation through this last election. Under Saul, he started off as a young man, as a king, and then pride got to him. David was anointed while he was king, and he wanted to protect his kingdom. He wanted to protect his family line. He didn't realize that God gave him the kingdom, and then God gave his kingdom to David. And so he was fighting God all of this time. He was spending resources, using the army, doing all kinds of crazy things to try and eradicate and eliminate David from the face of the earth. And there's a lot of story behind this, but what I want you to see is that in one day, there was a transition of power where the evil spirit on that nation had left, and now God was back in charge. And I believe that a lot of this happened in our election. I believe that the way they were spending their money, what they were doing with the border and all of the other things that they were doing, it wasn't the will of God in our nation. And that we had departed from God and his plan for our nation. I'm not saying Donald Trump is Jesus. He's not. He's not our Savior. We're liable to have very rough times under him as well as under Biden. But what we can be assured of is he's going to do what's in the best interest of our nation. So Saul is really a picture of a leader who has very much his own self-interest. Very much he wanted to preserve the line so that Jonathan would be king. And he had the army chasing the man that was anointed by God to be a leader. You just can't do that and not suffer. I think his son Jonathan knew it was coming. But anyway, under the new leadership, the Philistines that had invaded the cities and lived in the cities, David drove them all out. David unified the kingdom from the Philistines and from others on their land. He brought about peace through strength. He consolidated the northern kingdom and the southern kingdom. When you look at the history of Israel in the Old Testament, it's broken up into 4 500-year sections leading up to the birth of Jesus. The first 500 years were the patriarchs: Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Joseph, and the patriarchs. The second 500 years led from Moses, that was made up of prophets, from Moses to Samuel. The third 500 years was the king, and Saul being the first, and then David and Solomon and so on. The last 500 was during the minor prophets. We see that Zechariah anointed a priest to be their leader, the king. So when you look at it from Zerubbabel, the priests became the leaders of Israel, all the way to Caiaphas, when Jesus was on the earth. So Israel tried leadership in all of these categories, and they had good kings and they had bad kings. They had good prophets and they had bad prophets. They had good patriarchs and bad patriarchs, and they had good priests and bad priests. We're all leading up to Jesus, who would ultimately fill every one of those categories. And so we see that God had a plan that spanned the centuries, and he has a plan for our nation. I believe there's a new spirit in our land. I believe that we may see war under Donald Trump, but we won't be in a war that'll linger on for 20 years. I believe that he'll bring peace to Jerusalem, and Jerusalem will become an international city. Anyway, God bless you. Thanks for watching. Please share, follow, and like this message. And if you're not a donor, please pray about donating to our ministry. We produce Christian content. We produce Bible study curriculums. There are 120 page workbooks, along with anywhere from 6 to 12 sets of videos on a subject. We have 8 of those completed. They're all done in the studio. Now they cost almost $60,000 to build, $65,000 to build. And then we give them away for free. We don't charge anybody for anything we have, both physical or digital. We just ask them to join us when they use our materials. So God bless you. Pray about giving, pray about sharing, helping us build our community.